Hello and welcome to another episode of Taylor Talks Comics. Today we are talking Mad Max Fury Road. Please stay tuned. And we're back. So today we're talking Mad Max Fury Road. It's a movie that I absolutely adore. It took the film industry by storm when it first came out. And I am going to tie this to comics, so don't fret. You are still watching a comic channel. I'm not veering off into some other tangent. But the reason why this has always been tied to comics for me is when I found out that McCarthy, the cartoonist from the UK, had a big hand in the writing of and the storyboard making of Mad Max. This is Brendan McCarthy's Milligan and McCarthy, The Best Of, came out by Dark Horse. I'll do a separate video on this as well as the Judge Dredd by McCarthy. But when I found out he co-wrote the movie and wrote all the storyboards, I was instantly fascinated by the movie, and then I wanted to kind of dive into these other, down these other roads. These two books were put out by DC Vertigo, back when Vertigo was still a thing. And this book was put out by, I think, Titan. Yeah, Titan Books. So first I want to show off these other two because the big one, this is really the one I want to show off. But I just want to go through this quickly. So I got these all from my library recently. I just wanted to try them out and see if they're any good or not, or worth having, worth owning. And I think the spoiler alert, the answer, I think I do want to own a copy of this. These two, maybe not so much. First, let's do this one. This is inspired artists with commentary from the artist. I guess there is commentary. But this is like an oversized hardcover. It's deluxe. And it's basically just 2-page pinups of Mad Max drawings by a bunch of great artists. But the way this book's put together really was kind of frustrating, to be honest. You can kind of see underneath the dust jacket there. Again, whenever I show off library books, I can't pull off the dust jacket completely. So if I was to design this book, I would think I would go about it a completely different way. There wasn't really much thought put into the design of the book, which is always frustrating when you're talking about an art book. I don't understand that mindset. But like the end paper says boring black. You could have done something cool there. Title paper is pretty cool. You get a George Miller intro, which is really cool. But then you just get right into the art. And there's no table of contents in the beginning. You have no idea who this artist is. And it just keeps going into more art, which is great. That's what I bought this for. Or not bought this for. Check this out for. Why I would buy it if I were to. Now, the only way to know the artist is in the back on the dust jacket. It does list all the artists in order. But then you're stuck doing this like back and forth flip. It's like the first artist is John Van Fleet. And the next artist is Gabriel Dell'Otto. And Nicole Scott. So you're doing this back and forth, which isn't awful. This one is Lee Bermejo. Teddy Christensen. It's not an awful experience because at least there is an order. It would have been even more annoying if they decided to do like alphabetical order here and then a completely different order there. This is Mike Allred, my favorite cartoonist going today. It's really cool to see. But I don't know, like a little caption down here of who the artist was, because not every artist signs their work too, which is also kind of frustrating. This is Francesca Francavilla, and he does sign his artwork, which is great. So at least I know who that is right away, because not even just based on the art style, but the signature there. But not all of them sign them. Like this one is, I guess. That's, I don't recognize that signature. Declan Shalvey. That's David Mack. So the signatures kind of tip you off sometimes, but not always. And then this is Bill Sienkiewicz, who did sign it. But maybe a little caption down here, like a real small, subtle one that doesn't really take away from the artwork would have been nice. Because I understand you can't really do like a intro page for each piece. Because then it's going to throw off the 2-page spread, because these are all 2-page spreads. So if you have an intro piece on this page that introduces the next piece of artwork, you're going to be thrown off for the whole book, and it's going to add a whole bunch to your page count. So I get that. Maybe breaking down into sections would have been an easier way to handle that, like sections of 5, I don't know. I just feel like that could have been put together better. But the artwork is really cool. There are some really cool pieces in here. This is Derek Robertson, who's a really great artist that I like a lot. And who's this one? Dave McKean. Yeah, this is, I was going to say, this is like the haunting imagery of a Dave McKean that you know of. Here's a really cool 80s inspired one. So there are some cool art pieces in here. I'm not going to flip through the whole book because it kind of defeats the purpose of you checking it out or buying it. Is this Javier Pulido? Yeah, he did kind of a cool little comic book type deal for his. So there are some cool pieces in here. But another frustrating thing is that they did glued binding on this. And I don't know why. So you can see the binding is just completely glued down. There's no eye at all. They didn't do sewn binding on this. Which is frustrating for book design because you can see the book doesn't lay flat at all. It closes on you. Even in the very middle of the book, it's trying to close on you. And when your book is specifically designed for 2-page spreads, you'd think you do sewn binding so the book can lift up and you can actually spread it out and look at it, look at the artwork in its proper form. But with this glued binding, there's going to be gutter loss in here, which isn't a big deal for comics sometimes when there's panels, breaks in the middle between the pages. But when you're literally, this whole book is just 2-page spreads, and it's just like, I don't know. The design of this book was really frustrating, and it made me not want to have this or own this on my shelf because for that reason. Even though there's some really cool pieces in here I would love to have on my shelf or have them as art prints and things. Some of my favorite artists that are in here doing one of my favorite movies, which is really cool. And in the back, you do have artists in order of appearance. Again, they are in order of how they appear. And then each artist wrote a little short paragraph about what Mad Max means to them. This is probably one of the coolest parts of the book because it does give you kind of insight into how influential Mad Max was to a bunch of comic artists. Here's the prelude to the blockbuster film by Vertigo. And this was okay. It wasn't the greatest thing I've read. I feel like it did suffer from some of the artistic choices. I think Mad Max, like, here's the thing, like the artwork in here is largely done by Mark Sexton, who was one of the storyboard artists with Brendan McCarthy on Fury Road. So naturally, you'd think like, oh, the storyboard artist, have him do the comic. That sounds great. And he writes the introduction in here. Well, I think I don't know, like, I would just wish it had a more stylized artist that took things in a different way, because the appeal of Fury Road was largely the aesthetics and the high octane action scenes that were done with practical effects. So when you're dealing with still imagery of a comic book, it's a totally different medium. You have to handle it differently. And to get some of those impressions, Nico Lathoris also writes part of the script, and George Miller. Nico Lathoris is the third credited writer on Fury Road, and George Miller is obviously the creator of Mad Max and credited with writing it. And then I should say it's not just Mark Sexton, it is Seisman Kodransky and Tristan Jones on some of these stories. But anyways, so it's like the still imagery of, so you don't get to have a lot of that high octane, crazy, balls to the wall action scenes. You're working in a different medium, so you have to have different ways of showing those kinds of things. So that's when you get if you had a stylized artist like a Daniel Warren Johnson or somebody that can really make the artwork look exciting and just coming off the page and just gets your adrenaline pumping as much as a comic book can, that would be more apropos, I think, than this kind of storyboardish style of Mark Sexton. I think Brendan McCarthy would have been perfect too. He has a very stylized art style that would really pull off what I'm kind of talking about here. But this is all prelude to the Fury Road movie. So the first issue is about Nux and kind of his backstory. It's an okay story. I think the appeal of Nux is not where he came from, but where he goes. I think if you're watching Fury Road, the Nux character is really great. And it's great to see the trajectory he goes on throughout the movie from being just a, generic war boy to becoming somewhat of a hero. But I don't really need to know his origin story. I don't think that was necessary. I think maybe an after the movie where next skills would be kind of interesting. Then you get Furiosa's origin story, which is interesting, and this was a good story. So you gotta get where she came from, and it's all leads up to when she breaks out the 5 wives and puts them in the ward rig, and then they leave. Is how that story literally ends as the Fury Road movie's beginning. Then you get Max Part 1 and Max Part 2. This is telling the whole backstory of Mad Max. So you get like scenes from all the movies leading up to Fury Road. And this great panel layout. Well, this is one of my favorite parts about this book. And honestly, these 2 issues are probably my favorite 2 issues. Getting all the backstory of Mad Max. And another thing I'll say is that the color choices throughout the Max story were way better. And Mike Spicer's a colorist throughout the entire book, which I was kind of surprised by, because when I got to these, one of my gripes in these first couple issues is that it's all muddied browns and like there's not a lot of color delineation. Now, you think of Fury Road, on its surface, it does kind of come out that way. Like if you're looking at it on its surface, it's just like a little like muddied browns, green, like dark greens, dark browns, dark blacks. There's not a lot of color delineation when you're watching that movie on its surface, but then when you really dive into the movie and the visuals, there is a lot of color in that movie. I think you just don't, and it's done for story reasons. I was kind of surprised when Mike Spicer was the colorist throughout this whole book, because he does such a tremendous job in his last 2 issues, and I didn't care for what he did in the first 2 issues. And Mike Spicer is a colorist that I'm really grown to love. He does a lot of the coloring for, I think he's done all the coloring for all of Dana Warren Johnson's recent works. The aforementioned Dana Warren Johnson. And what I mean by, so this is like a very muddied red, brown kind of image, right? But then when you get to different scenes, the color usage helps tell the story. And like right here, so you have Max standing out amongst the crowd because he's wearing this black jacket, which, I mean, is done with more of a bluish, grayish tone. Compared to all the muddied browns and stuff around him. So he's standing out. He's a central figure of the scene. That's what you want. And then there's these scenes that take place at nighttime. So you have like this campfire scene, and then you're moving on to a different passage, and you have a different color choice. So again, you can use color even in a muddied brownish type story. Here's another great use of color on this page. So, and then the back has this exclusive story that was only released. Like these were all released in single issues by DC. This War Rig story, which is totally, or the artwork is by Peter Pound, which I think his artwork fits in. Like I really liked his artwork as far as like what I'm talking about, the more of a stylized cartooning approach in its purest form. But this was exclusive to this trade paperback. And this is all about the War Rig and how it came to be. It's like a 6 to 8 pager, I think. Overall, it's okay. I think Mad Max is a character in a story that could be ripe for a really long comic book run. I do like licensed comics. I think I'm going to do a video on my favorite licensed comics. Maybe that just wasn't the greatest effort. But this is a tremendous book. And especially for comic book fans, Mad Max fans, this is the art of Mad Max Fury Road. And it has lots of artwork by Mark Sexton, by Brendan McCarthy, and then a lot of still images of the movie. So here's a early image of one of the great cars. And it doesn't tell you exactly who's on artwork at all times. I do wish there was kind of some annotations that would let you know. But otherwise, this is very, very good. You get like a handwritten intro piece of Fury Road. You get the prologue. So you get a lot of like kind of an oral history a little bit of how this movie came to be. But also lots of great artwork. So the thing that ties this to comics is that this movie was not scripted. It was not typewritten script. There was never one time that someone sat down at a computer and just type wrote the entire script for Fury Road. It was entirely written in storyboards. And it started with Brendan McCarthy in the late 90s, storyboarding the thing out. Like, you can even see an early image of Mad Max drawn by, I think this is Brendan McCarthy. And it's drawn to look more like Mel Gibson. And you can see some in storyboards, Mel Gibson still, it was the idea of having him take over, or not take over, but continue on as Max. Here's some early images of the Citadel. Sometimes there are annotations of who drew what, but not always. I wish there was more of that. And maybe they just didn't keep that information. I think there are times when Mark Sexton says he like drew over the top of some of the panels of the storyboards and whatnot. One thing I'd love to see though, is that like a whole book of just the storyboards. I'd be all over that. Like a whole book of just storyboarded stuff out by Sexton and Brendan McCarthy, because the storyboards apparently had like the script and the dialogue and stuff written next to each panel, so it would read just like a comic book if they'd released that. This is the closest thing we've had to that, because it does have some of the interior art. Here's some Morton Joe's early designs, which are pretty great. This piece almost looks like an H.R. Giger piece. But the cars too, here, this one's signed by Brendan McCarthy. The cars are just amazing. Like, when you think of Mad Max, you think of these awesome looking cars, and I can't believe that they built these things for real. Like, that's one of the more amazing things to me about this movie, is that they were able to piece these things together from other cars and mash them together and make them actually like work. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm not a huge car guy and that why that amazes me so much, but the car designs though are all intricate. And I think one of the things that George Miller said when he was like, his kind of like mission statement to the production people that were putting things together, to doing artwork or doing props or whatever, was that even though this is a post-apocalyptic, even though these people don't have resources, they still like to make beautiful things. So that's why all of the designs are very intricate and made to not just be demolition derby cars, to be like actually pieces that you could see someone work on, that they become characters themselves. But yeah, this is an amazing book. I definitely want to seek this out. I think it is out of print, and last I saw, it was kind of hard to find and maybe a little pricey, but I was happy to see that my library had this. My library has a system, and maybe your libraries do too, but where they're connected to a bunch of different libraries throughout the state, and if you search on their website, they can get books, if they don't have it in their own library, they can get it transferred from another library. And that was what the case that I had to do with all three of these books. My library didn't have any of these books, my local one. So they had to get them shipped in from other libraries throughout the state. There's Nex himself. Again, great character. I just don't know if I need to know his backstory. But yeah, a lot of the plans that Brendan McCarthy came up with George Miller in the late 90s came to fruition in Fury Road. Nico Thoris did have his thumbprint, or his handprints, fingerprints on the script as well. Brendan McCarthy even credits Nico with coming up with a lot of ideas that really fleshed out some of these characters and scenes and really brought life to them. See, every character, every prop that a character has is like a very signature item to that one person. Like, they almost like wrote their own backstories to make sure all the props and everything fit the character that they were portraying, which is cool. It makes them all very distinct, and it's just some of those things too that watching it the first time you might not notice. You might just be like, oh, they all have a bunch of junk they piece together and they're moving on. But the more times you watch it, you grow to really appreciate these little things about what they have. The Bullet Farmer, which is a great character design. So yeah, this is an awesome book to have if you're into art books, you're into Mad Max, you're into Brendan McCarthy artwork, which is all three of those things describe me. Kind of see if there's any really cool images to... Oh, here's an afterword by Brendan McCarthy. So he writes his afterword here with his little story about what's going on. You see these characters too are very much Brendan McCarthy designs. Like, they look like ripped out of his comics. And that's it. So here's 3 books about Mad Max Fury Road. This one could have been better if it was designed better. as a true art book and not just a thrown together book to sell based on the name, which is what I feel like they did. This comic was a good start. I feel like Mad Max, like I said, could be a really great comic book series if you had the right artists and writers on the team. And then this is an amazing book, which I can't recommend enough. So thank you guys for watching. I am on the road to 2,000 subscribers. I'm closer and closer. I appreciate if you guys can give this a sub, share it with your friends, give the video a thumbs up, and comment down below. The thumbs up, the like button, and the comments all help YouTube see that this is a video that should be in the front of the eyeballs of other comic book readers. So I really appreciate any of that. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.